Hey everybody, welcome into this edition of Crunch Time on ASTV Productions. I'm your host Joe Hamilton along with Scott Tobin. Scott, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Joe, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's kind of a lazy day today. You had all that rain. We better get used to it too because we're going to be seeing a lot more rain. So I'd rather have this than snow, and I heard the possibility of that maybe later next week, whatever. But Scott, breaking before this show, St. Louis Blues goaltender Jordan Binnington has signed a 6-year extension worth $6 million per year, and that is at $36 million. Jordan Binnington coming off of a Stanley Cup winning season. Hasn't been the same since. I remember, Scott, you telling me he still needs to prove a little bit more, and a lot of people like this move. I can see why some people don't, though. What do you think about this move?
I'm surprised they did 6 years. I mean, he's definitely played well this year. You know, he's looking more like the Binnington that we saw in that Stanley Cup run. And he's not really coming off of a Stanley Cup win because that was 2 years ago now.
We forget
about that because of the COVID and the bubble last year. But yeah, it's been 2 years since they won the Cup.
It's been 2 years, yeah. But and even last year, Scott, I remember us talking about this very same thing, and you were saying he has a lot more to prove. Has he started to prove that, Scott, or is it still a work in progress for you?
Yeah, I mean, he's looked more like the guy that we saw during that Stanley Cup run than the guy we saw last year. And I mean, he's a solid goalie. And this isn't a bad move for the Blues because now you have a guy under contract, under control. You know what you can do with your salary for the next 6 years because your goalie's locked up. So it gives the Blues financial stability. You know, they have a plan now of how they fill out the rest of their roster for the next few years with money and everything. So it's a good move, you know, and hopefully Binnington holds up and it's a good 6-year run for him.
Binnington, I was watching his press conference. I don't know if you saw that or not, Scott, but he basically said the same thing you did, and he's like, money isn't everything for me. I just want to have a good team around me. And that's what I like in a goaltender. I mean, you had 2 goalies last year making upwards of almost $10 million to the cap. Now you have a goaltender that's not making anything in Ville Husso, and the most you're paying a goaltender is $6 million. Now, $2 million less than a goalie and John Gibson gets, and they're both 25, 26. So I like this move. But I can see where people are kind of eerie on it.
Isn't Binnington older than that? Isn't he more like 28, something like that?
Let me look that up real quick because I'm not too sure. I know he was 25 when he came up.
So he wouldn't be 25 now.
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, Scott, do you think the Blues have their goaltender? Do you think that do you think that it would have gotten done if it didn't get done right now?
Oh, I think it probably would have. You know, again, the Blues saw enough in him to go ahead and get this extension done now. And like we just talked about, you know, it gives them financial stability. It lets them plan how they're going to approach things with the salary cap now for the next 6 years. So yep. It's a good move by Armstrong, setting things up, setting this club up, figuring out how he wants to move forward. And now the Blues have a plan and a definite strategy of how they're going to do things. And it sets Jordan Binnington up financially because, you know, $36 million over the next 6 years is not anything to sneeze at.
Not at all. And Jordan Binnington is 27 years old. So that could take him into his 30s. Some goalies I've seen play well into their 30s, you know. I mean, of course, you can in their 40s, even Martin Brodeur. And I'm not saying he's a Martin Brodeur, but he did learn under him. So that does help things. So it'll be interesting to see what this team does to supplement around Jordan Binnington for the foreseeable future. But the one thing I did watch tonight, Scott, was an instant classic between the Winnipeg Jets and the Toronto Maple Leafs. I know you didn't see the game. Just let me goaltending all around. Former Vezina winner and Connor Hellebuck stood on his head. Freddie Anderson, of course, stands on his head all the time. Man, I love games like that. That's why I love watching Northern Division hockey. But I digress. It was fun to watch tonight. That overtime was probably one of the best periods I think I've ever seen. And, of course, Austin Matthews ices the game winner. So good job, Toronto. And, if you're Winnipeg, don't hang your head because you played a hell of a game. Scott, a lot of things went on today in the college basketball world. I mean, let's get into Duke first, because today we found out that Duke is out of the ACC tournament because of a positive COVID test within the program. Now, that's got to suck for Duke. I mean, they've already had a wishy-washy season, and to have it end like this is kind of a downer.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't ever want your season to end not on the court with something like this. I mean, it was going to be tough. Like you said, Duke's not had the best year, so they were probably going to have to make it to the finals of the ACC tournament, if not win the tournament to get into the big dance. It's not been their best year, but for their season to end like this is pretty rough. And you got to look at it this way. Duke had a 24-year run. They've made the big dance the last 24 years. So for that streak to end not on the court, but with the medical thing, is kind of a tough thing to handle I'm sure, for Coach K and those guys. But, we knew something like this was probably going to happen. And it may happen again, before the tournament starts. We may see a couple more teams that have outbreaks that end up having to miss out on the big dance still. But with that forfeit today by Duke, it allows Florida State to advance because that would have been their opponent today. And it's a rough thing for the kids. You hate to see it happen, but it's the COVID world we live in right now.
It is the sad world we live in right now. So Duke is out of the tournament. That does suck. What are the other storylines you've been following around college basketball, at least in terms of today?
There were some big ones. We saw Kentucky go down. Kentucky doesn't advance to the SEC quarterfinals for the first time in 9 years, as they got beat by Mississippi State today, 74-73. So that's kind of another big one. That's another perennial powerhouse that's not going to be in the big dance this year. And the Kentucky Wildcats, it's been a while since the Blue Devils and the Wildcats, neither one were in the tournament. Some other things around the country in the Big East tournament, the number one seed there, Villanova, fell to Georgetown, 73-72. Georgetown was 23 of 23 from the free throw line in that game. And a little interesting note on that one, Georgetown head coach in Madison Square Garden in New York, Knicks legend Patrick Ewing, apparently a security guard at the Garden didn't know who Patrick Ewing was today. And Patrick wasn't real happy about it. He basically said, everybody in this building should know who the hell I am. My jersey's hanging in the rafters. And he's got a point. I mean, he's one of the greatest Knicks ever. And Patrick Ewing's pretty recognizable. Anybody that's a basketball fan or anybody that's watched television for the last 20 years, 30 years, should be able to recognize Patrick Ewing, especially in New York. So I can kind of understand Patrick being a little upset about that one.
I can understand it too. And it doesn't surprise me because, there was an issue with this with, I forget another player that was banned from Madison Square Garden. I know it was a former Knicks player. Can you kind of name that? Charles Oakley. And I know this is a different scenario, Scott, but do you see any similarities here? Because if you work at the most iconic arena in the world, or at least one of them, you should know who one of the most iconic basketball players that ever played for the Knicks is.
You would think so. It's not the best look, but sometimes things happen. And like I said, I can understand Patrick being upset about it. The Charles Oakley thing is different because he and Knicks owner James Dolan have had issues going back for a long time. James Dolan, not one of the greatest owners in sports. We've talked about him many times.
Yeah.
He ranks right up there with Stan Kroenke as being one of the worst. So, there have been run-ins with lots of people. Spike Lee's had some issues with security at Madison Square Garden, which is odd also since Spike is probably the most famous Knicks fan in the world. But stuff like that happens in the Garden under Dolan's watch, unfortunately. But big win for Georgetown today. Patrick is starting to bring that team, his alma mater. He's starting to bring Georgetown back to prominence. So that's a big win for them today, and hopefully they can keep advancing. A couple of other things. Baylor held on in the Big 12. They advanced to the semifinals. They beat Kansas State today. Kansas also advanced to the semifinals in the Big 12. They took out Oklahoma. And then people in our area are pretty happy tonight because in the SEC tournament, Mizzou beat Georgia 73-70. Ended up being a nail biter. Mizzou was up by 12, and you messaged me and said, I like the way this Mizzou game's going, and I said there's still time left.
And no, I knew there was a chance I might have jinxed that, and I'm glad I didn't to a certain extent. But Scott, you were watching that whole game today, so was I. That shooting early by both teams were bad. There was actually a comment that somebody at the SEC network made in studio saying, so many bricks out here, they could build another gym next door.
Yeah, the shooting in the first half wasn't good. About the first 10 minutes, it heated up. Good sign from Mizzou tonight. Xavier Pinson started to get back on a roll a little bit. He's really struggled the last month or so. So, that's a huge plus for Mizzou if they can get him going in the right direction this time of the year. And Mizzou's got a big game tomorrow night. We move on to the quarterfinals of the SEC tournament, and we play an old rival, a border rival, as we play the number 2 seed in this tournament, our old friends from down south, the Arkansas Razorbacks. Be the third time these two teams have met this year. They split the first 2 times. So that's a big win. You look at bracketology going into the game tonight. Joe Lenardi had Mizzou as an 8 seed. With the win tonight, maybe they jump to a 7. If you can beat Arkansas, maybe you jump up even farther to a 6. We kind of talked about it before the show. I don't think Mizzou could win the tournament and be much more than a 4 seed, but I think if they can win this tournament, they could potentially be a 4 in the Big Dance. So there's a lot still at stake for Mizzou.
Yeah, and it's not like Arkansas is not beatable. Like you said, they split with them during the season, so that should be a good game tomorrow. Another area team's making their first appearance in the Big Ten tournament tomorrow. Talk about Illinois' chances. It's going to be a tough tournament.
It is going to be a tough tournament. There's a ton of teams in the Big Ten. But, Illinois plays tomorrow night. They're the 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament. And, they've got a good shot of winning that tournament. But even if they don't, we talked about this before the tournament started this week. I think Illinois still got a lock on the number 1 seed in the Big Dance in one of those 4 regions, no matter what they do this weekend in the Big Ten tournament. So I think it's a no-lose situation, honestly, for the Illini as they roll into this Big Ten tournament this weekend.
Yeah, so they're sitting pretty. So is it a slam dunk that Gonzaga is gonna win their conference tournament?
Never a slam dunk. Never a slam dunk. They had a pretty big scare from BYU the other night. So, you just never know this time of year. And some guys, a team like that knows that they're probably a number 1 seed in the Big Dance, not necessarily going into this conference tournament with a whole lot on the line. So they may take it easy a little bit because they're looking forward to next week. But I think no doubt Gonzaga is a number 1 seed when the announcement comes out on Sunday, in the Big Dance. They'll definitely be a number 1 and more than likely the overall number 1 seed.
Where are these teams, Scott, you think are going to end up in terms of, region? Because I know they do that by seed, right?
Yeah, to a certain extent. They want to try to avoid, we talked about this.
We talked. Yeah.
On the podcast, I guess we talked about this. They want to try to avoid conference rivals meeting up early, that kind of stuff. You don't necessarily want an all conference final in your region. But this year, I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference where anybody ends up because, again, nobody's going anywhere. All these games are being played in Indianapolis. So, I'm not as worried about where somebody's going, region-wise. Matchups are still important, obviously. But whether you're in the East or West or North or South doesn't make a whole lot of difference, or the Midwest this year. So
it really doesn't make a lot of a difference, that's for sure. Scott, go ahead and dub our bracket challenge, because I'm going to do this every night until this tournament gets underway.
Yeah, as Joe just alluded to, if you go to our page, we do have a bracket challenge going on. You can go click on that, click the link, and when the brackets come out on Sunday, fill out your bracket, and you can challenge us, see if you're smarter than we are, Joe Wags and myself, and everybody else who gets involved in our challenge. And there's going to be a bunch of prizes out there too. So there's going to be something for you to win. So like I said, go to our website, check out our bracket challenge. And when the brackets actually come out on Sunday, go fill one out and see if you can beat us when it comes to bracketology.
Yeah, go ahead and see if you can beat us when it comes to bracketology, because I don't watch closely in college basketball. Maybe I'll get lucky this year, Scott.
A lot of brackets come down to luck, man. I know a lot of people that have won bracket challenges because they liked mascots, or they liked jersey colors, or they liked the name of the teams, or a lot of times people that win don't necessarily win because of the basketball team themselves.
Yeah, sometimes they don't. Sometimes, man, you're right. But I do have to say that, hell, I mean, you got to be lucky to be good. Or is that the term?
Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
There we go. So what are you thinking, Scott, in terms of having the best opportunities this year? Of course, Gonzaga. Is there anyone that can hold a candle to Gonzaga?
I think Illinois has proven that they're as good as anybody in the country.
Mizzou.
They're going to be right there. Baylor's really good. On any given night, Mizzou can be really good because we've seen them beat Illinois. We've seen them beat Oregon. We've seen them beat Arkansas. We've seen them beat Alabama. Mizzou on any given night can be really good and beat anybody, or they can be really off and be really ugly. So you just don't know what to expect going into this tournament with Mizzou, because they have the ability to play with anybody in this tournament. But like I said, they could also have an off night and get knocked out in the first round. So a lot of matchup. What happens with matchups is going to be big for Mizzou, I think.
I think so too. So what next? Next, we'll talk about let's talk about some Major League Baseball, because some news came out on Miles Mikolas. Go ahead with that, Scott, because he's not going to be ready for the season. I don't think he'll be ready at all. I don't think he'll pitch this year, Scott.
I think there'd be some pretty upset people if Miles Mikolas doesn't pitch this year, because they did some tests on his shoulder. They took some x-rays, did some scans, and there's no structural damage. There's nothing showing up structurally wrong with his shoulder. So they're going to take it slow and have him work through it. But right now, hopefully he can get through the little bit of achiness, the weak shoulder he has, but there's nothing physically wrong with his shoulder as far as structurally that he needs surgery or anything like that, at least not to this point. So, they're going to take it slow. They're going to be careful with him. But, all signs right now are that we will see Miles Mikolas at some point this year, and hopefully sooner than later.
That opens up, there was probably a fight for that fifth spot. I think it opens up another spot, Scott. Am I wrong? Am I right? Do you think there's only one spot up for grabs?
Well, I mean, there's going to be two. There are two spots available because Mikolas isn't going to be ready for opening day. Carlos is more than likely taking one of those spots, and then the fifth spot, like we've talked about, you're going to see you may see a mix and match. It may be John Gann, it may be Ponce, it could be. There's a bunch of guys that could potentially get that opportunity. You may throw different people out there different days, but like we talked about, from everything we heard yesterday, as far as what they saw with those looks that they took at his shoulder, while he's not going to be ready for opening day, hopefully this isn't something that lingers all year or a couple of months. Hopefully by the end of April or May, he's good and feels good and is able to go out there and pitch, which would be huge for the Cardinals if Miles Michaelis is able to come out there and be the guy they need him to be.
Yeah, and who knows if Miles Michaelis I don't think he'll ever be the 18-game winner he was a couple years ago, but I think there is still a good Miles Michaelis out there. I don't know at what level is that, Scott? Is that a 10-game winner? Is that a 12-game winner? What is it at this point?
I don't see any reason why Miles Michaelis can't win 15 or 16 games. I mean, I think he's got that in him. There's no reason to think he can't be that. And, he's not going to win 18 this year because he's probably not going to get enough starts or pitch enough innings in his first few starts. But if he's healthy, there's no reason Miles Michaelis can't be a 14, 15, maybe even a 16-game winner.
So I like to hope so, just because I like Miles Michaelis. He reminds me, he has the same kind of stuff to me as an Adam Wainwright. Not overpowering, but he does get outs and he does get ground balls when he has to. He doesn't strike out a ton of guys, but when you have the stuff he does, you need to learn to pitch and not just to throw. Speaking of a guy like Adam Wainwright, Greg Amsinger was on 101 earlier today talking about Matthew Liberatore. And basically what he said, we can look back 10 years from now, and Matthew Liberatore will be this team's Adam Wainwright. How much truth do you see in that? You told me earlier, but tell everybody else.
Well, what he said was, I'm just going to put the whole story out there. What he said was 10 years from now, he thinks, when we look back on this, that the Cardinals will have won the Liberatore-Randy Arozarena trade. He thinks Matthew Liberatore's got all the talent in the world, and he thinks that he'll be the next kind of Adam Wainwright. Not talking about his stuff, not comparing him that way, but being the guy that's in this rotation for a long time and is kind of the leader of that rotation, because he said, that he's wise beyond his years. He's really intelligent baseball guy. He's a baseball rat. And so he just thinks that he's going to be kind of the face of that pitching rotation. Not that Jack Flaherty won't be there as well potentially, but he's just really, really high on Matthew Liberatore and thinks he could be in that Adam Wainwright mold as a long-term Cardinal.
Yeah, I totally see that with Liberatore. I just hope they do win that trade, because I'm so tired of hearing, and this is not seeing him a full season either. Oh, the Cardinals screwed up on that deal. The Cardinals this, the Cardinals that. And it seems like it always happens. It happened when the Cardinals got rid of Luke Voit. He went to New York and became a star. Thing is, you can't judge what Luke Voit is doing in Yankee Stadium to what he would be doing here. You can't do that. Same thing with Randy Arozarena. The thing is, he shouldn't have posted a post-game, postseason video that he took in the locker room. You don't do that. And I think that was the main reason he was traded. Scott, do you see that?
No. I think the Cardinals had the opportunity to get Cardinals didn't have a whole lot of left-handed young pitching in their farm system, and they had the opportunity to get one of the best rated left-handed pitchers in all of baseball in minor leagues. And so they had to throw Randy Arozarena in that. Tampa wanted Jose Martinez, and then Randy Arozarena was the other one of the Cardinal young outfielders that they wanted. And Arozarena was blocked here. He wasn't going to play here because the Cardinals were going to give Harrison Bader that chance. They were going to give Tyler O'Neill that chance, and Dylan Carlson was coming. So Arozarena and Thomas, yeah. I mean, but Carlson's the guy, in that. And so Arozarena wasn't going to get much of a chance to play here. And, he went down there and he looked good for 60 games in the postseason. Let's see what he does for a full season before people put him in the Hall of Fame. But, I hope Randy Arozarena has a good career. But I think the trade was more about Matthew Liberatore and the upside the Cardinals saw in needing a young left-hander than it had to do with Randy Arozarena.
Yeah, I would. You got a point there. Speaking of the rotation here, Scott, what about a guy like Zach Thompson? Why haven't we seen much of him?
Because he hasn't pitched in the minor leagues very much. You got to remember, this kid got drafted out of college 2 years ago, and then there wasn't a minor league season last year. So
Aren't college pitchers more polished?
Well, not when they don't get a chance to pitch in the minor leagues other than about 12 games. I mean, that's all we're talking about with Zach Thompson is like 12 minor league appearances. So he's on the verge of coming. He is advanced, but he hasn't had a whole lot of experience pitching in professional baseball yet. So you want to get him some more innings before you rush him up here. But he's another guy. Gamsinger talked about him too, how much he liked him, the stuff that he has. So we're going to see Zach Thompson, whether it's the end of this year or next year, but he's going to be a mainstay in that Cardinal rotation as well. And, everybody always talks about wanting one lefty in this rotation. Well, there's two really good young lefties that are coming that are going to be a huge part of this rotation for years to come, if not this year, probably next year.
Scott, before we go to break here, I want to ask you kind of a simple question here. Is being too right-handed heavy or being too left-handed heavy not a good thing for a rotation?
Again, everybody talks about that. I don't really know that it has that much to do with whether you're right-handed or left-handed, because you can have all the right-handers in the world or all the left-handers in the world. It's more about quality than how they throw. I mean, we've seen the Cardinals win a lot with no lefties in their rotation, and then you've seen teams win with two or three lefties. But it goes back to quality. I mean, I don't want a lefty in my rotation just to say I have a lefty, or I don't want a full righty rotation, if they're not any good. It comes down to quality, whether you're left-handed or right-handed, basically.
Yeah, it comes down to quality, and I'm asking that question, Scott, based off of, the Los Angeles Dodgers one year had Alex Wood. Or wait, I'm trying to think. They had two or three lefties in their rotation, and I remember asking you that, and it's like, I think being a little too one-sided heavy is not a good thing. So, Scott, why don't you take us to break here? What do we got coming up?
When we come back, we're going to talk about NFL free agency. You're going to talk about your big thing of the day, which is going to be what? Tease people, tell them what your big thing of the day is.
My big thing of the day is this is the 1-year anniversary of the coronavirus pandemic starting. And I'm going to talk about, well, you're going to have to wait and see how that conversation is going to go. But stick with us right here on Crunch Time. Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Joe alongside Scott. Before you go into like NFL free agency and things like that, I do want to bring this up. I was watching the highlights from the Texans press conference today. And it seemed the coach basically was reading, new head coach was basically reading from a script. Like, Deshaun Watson's our quarterback, blah, blah, blah. Did you read much into that, Scott?
It basically, again, for people that don't know what you're talking about, Houston Texans head coach had a conversation today that they have no backup plan. Deshaun Watson is their quarterback. They have no plans to trade him. If he sits out the season, they have no backup plan. They're planning on Deshaun Watson being the quarterback in Houston, and that's the way they're going about things. And like I've told you for weeks now, I don't think Deshaun Watson gets traded. Does he sit out the season? Potentially. But the Houston Texans have no intention of trading Deshaun Watson.
Well, I tend to think he'll still get traded, but that's just me. That's a conversation we'll keep having until we're blue in the face. What?
I mean, I'm going to ask you again. When you're hearing Houston say we have no intention of trading him, he's our quarterback. We're not even taking phone calls. What makes you think he's going to get traded?
Scott, do teams 100% put what they're doing out in the public? How many times have you told me this with the Cardinals? You've said, oh, they're trying to throw up a smoke screen. Maybe they're doing something, but they're not going to tell anybody. How many times have you told me that?
I don't think that's this situation, because you don't normally hear a team come out and say we have no backup plan. We're not taking phone calls. Usually, when you say we're not taking phone calls, we're not moving on. They're not, unless a team comes in and basically gives them their whole draft, which is what they want, basically. Well, we don't even know what they want because they won't really tell us what they want. They haven't. People are guessing and saying, "Oh, this is what we think," but Houston has never said, "Here's what it's going to take for Deshaun Watson to get moved." So, because Houston's saying, we're not interested, and they're not really giving you an asking price, I really don't think that Houston has any intention of trading him. I really think they're saying, okay, Deshaun, we have your rights. If you don't want to play, sit out. But we're not going to move you. I mean, that's really what it's looking like, unless they get exactly what they want, which may be somebody's whole draft. And if anybody does that, they're stupid.
I would agree. So what are the other things that you're hearing?
There's a bunch of rumblings. People in Seattle now, there are some reporters around the Seahawks that say, a month ago, if you would have asked them if Russell Wilson was going to be traded, they'd say there's absolutely no chance. Now they're starting to think maybe he does get moved. Again, it's going to take a lot to make Seattle move him, but things apparently are just keep deteriorating in that relationship. And, Seattle may end up trading Russell Wilson. I think there's a better chance right now that Russell Wilson gets moved than there is Deshaun Watson gets moved. Although I'm not sure either one of them inevitably does get traded. But right now I would lean more towards Russ getting moved. Another quarterback that we're hearing rumors that is probably the most likely of those three to go is Sam Darnold. The Jets are taking offers, and they're probably going to trade him if they get what they want. Again, they're not going to give Darnold away because he's only 23 and is still pretty highly thought of around the league. But if somebody gives them a good package, they will probably move on from Sam Darnold. But that trade probably won't happen until right around the draft, more than likely. And teams that we hear most linked to Darnold are teams like the Bears, teams like Washington, the 49ers potentially, if they move on from Jimmy Garoppolo, although
that doesn't seem like it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's looking less and less likely like that's going to happen. So, we talked about in the offseason all these quarterbacks getting moved and how crazy the league was going to be. It's very possible that most of those guys that we thought get moved don't. That it's more the backup type guys that end up moving around, and a lot of the starters that people thought were going to move don't move. So that'll be really interesting. There were some big releases today, and probably the biggest news that when it comes to that is what Kansas City did. Kansas City released both of their starting tackles. Both of these guys were hurt towards the end of the season. I mean, first off is Eric Fisher, who was the number one overall pick in the 2013 draft. He tore his Achilles right before the Super Bowl at the end of the AFC Championship game. So Eric Fisher's been released. Also, Mitchell Schwartz, their other starting tackle, has been released. And Schwartz has been there too, has been a very solid starter for the Chiefs. So Kansas City's going to rebuild their offensive line. It'll be interesting to see how they do it, whether they do it in the draft or if they do it in free agency. But we saw how bad things were without those guys in the Super Bowl. So Kansas City's really got to fill those two holes big time before the start of the season, or Patrick Mahomes will be running for his life.
And you got to be able to protect your billion. Well, he isn't making $1 billion. He's making you got to protect your $300 million man behind center. So they need to supplement that. They need to make that offensive line better. I just thought they were going to give those guys time to heal a little bit, but I'm shocked that this move was made. Were you shocked when you heard this, Scott?
No, I mean, I'm not shocked. The fact that they both got cut on the same day, a little surprising. And, they may both end up re-signing with Kansas City at lower prices. I mean, Eric Fisher's not going to be ready for the start of the season, obviously, with the torn Achilles.
Obviously.
So, he may rehab, and then you re-sign him at a really marked down price for this year. The same thing with Schwartz. They could end up re-signing these guys at much cheaper prices to get yourself, because the Chiefs were about $4 million over the cap when the day started today. So these are moves to get them under the salary cap so they can make other moves. So they could both come back to Kansas City eventually, but we'll just have to see how that plays out. Another guy that got cut today, the Saints just keep cutting big name guys, and this guy, people in St. Louis will remember quite fondly, Janoris Jenkins got cut by the Saints today.
That pissed me off. That pissed me off. There could have been other moves you could make. He was an asset to that defense, Scott.
Again, the Saints way over the cap,
and so they could resign him.
You have to make these moves. They might. I don't think that'll be the case. I think they'll rebuild through the draft. I think Jenkins will move on because I think the Saints are. You got to remember, Janoris Jenkins not young anymore. He's been in the league about 8 years now. So as a corner, you start to lose a step. So probably not the high value that he was when he signed that contract. Those kind of things happen. We saw a couple of signings today. The Bills re-signed their middle linebacker, Matt Milano, to a 4-year, $44 million deal. That's a good deal for them. They needed to get him back in and get him in before free agency started. The Texans addressed their running back situation a little bit today. They signed Mark Ingram to a 1-year deal. So that gives them a little more stability at the running back position. Those are kind of the big ones that happened today. And we're going to hear, again, free agency starts next week. So over the weekend, we'll start to hear some people starting to negotiate and probably hear some signings that will happen once they can actually do them next week. Because a lot of those deals are done, 3 or 4 days ahead of when they can actually be announced. So we'll probably start hearing some names. I would imagine probably Sunday or Monday we'll start hearing some names and where they're headed. So that's kind of what we're looking at the NFL right now.
Well, Scott, I want to, before I get to my big thing, I do want to bring this up. I mentioned Travis Etienne would be a good fit, and what would you think? And he could fall into their hands. So what do you think?
Travis Etienne is going to be a good fit pretty much anywhere he goes because he's a super talented running back who can also catch the ball.
Yeah. But Pittsburgh, what do you think?
It's not a bad spot. It's not a bad spot. I don't know if it's the best landing spot for him because I'm not sure the Steelers are that close to being a really serious playoff contender. The place that I would love to see him go is Buffalo. I think that would be the perfect landing spot for Travis Etienne would be Buffalo.
Yeah, after getting rid of John Brown, they need to address their running back situation. So that would be awesome. I'd love to see him in Green Bay, but hell, that's not going to happen. So Buffalo would be a nice fit for him. But then again, he'd fit anywhere.
Yeah. He would. He'll be a good fit wherever he lands. But yeah, Buffalo, he would be a nice weapon for Josh Allen. And we saw Buffalo with their injuries, with their running backs, struggle with that during the playoffs. And then a guy who could catch the ball, you could split him out, have him do all kinds of things. So that would be interesting. But like I said, he's going to be a good fit anywhere. Another place that I think would be a really good landing spot for him would be Arizona. And they're going to be kind of in a spot where they can take him because that would be an awesome weapon for Kyler Murray to add with DeAndre Hopkins to that offense. I think that would be a really good spot for him as well.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see. I think right now, what is he, Scott, between 14th and 18th?
That's where a lot of people are having him land, but he could go anywhere. He could go higher or lower than that. It just depends on if
Scott,
there's trade.
I'm shocked he wasn't projected higher. Are you?
No, because running backs, like we talked about this the other day, running backs don't get drafted super high very often anymore. I mean, you'll see it every once in a while. Guys, Saquon Barkley went really high, although a lot of people questioned that move by the Giants when they did it. Zeke Elliott went pretty high. Again, people questioned it. Todd Gurley had fallen. He fell to the Rams when they drafted him. So people just don't take running backs in the top 5 or 10 very often anymore. So probably 14 to 18 is probably where he'll land. He could fall a little bit depending on whether there's trades or something or if somebody really falls in love with him. But probably middle of the first round is where he'll end up going.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, Scott, that's for sure. You know what today is, Scott?
What's today, Joe?
Today is the 1 year anniversary of the COVID-19 pandemic starting. I believe we did our show from our last show from the studio. I think it was the day before. Am I wrong on that?
It was right around there. I don't remember if it was the day before or not, but yeah, it was within a couple of days of it for sure.
Yeah. So just quickly, how far we've come since this pandemic started. We didn't have any sports for a while. We were looking for content, doing these top 10 lists. And then sports came back. And you knew there were going to be some issues with sports. You had two bubbles, one in the NHL and NBA. You had Major League Baseball doing a 60-game season. Scott, just comment a little bit on the progress this country has made since then in the sports realm.
Yeah, I mean, we have, but before we get to there, let's talk a little bit about how everything went down that day. Because I actually remember the night that happened. When the first NBA games got postponed and the NHL announced that they were getting postponed, I was actually at Busch Stadium that night because we were having an orientation get together for all the staff members to come back together and get ready for opening day. And we were all in the ballpark and we were all excited and we were talking about it. And there was a little bit of concern, that maybe things get pushed back. Maybe we're not here until May or something, but nothing was official yet. We were all still really excited. And I got in my car and left and was on my way home and was listening to the Blues game actually on the radio when we heard the news that the NBA had canceled and the NHL was getting ready to cancel and everything was going to go to hell. And those are my memories of that night, is just leaving the ballpark so excited, looking forward to opening day at Busch Stadium, to getting in my car and hearing that news and realizing that things weren't going to be normal for a while, probably. But to go back to your point to where we are now, we are slowly starting to get things back to normal. I mean, like you said, we went from having no sports to hockey and basketball to the ball in the bubble to baseball playing in empty stadiums to college football playing how they could, with lots of games getting postponed and moved around. And then, we saw the NFL, the scheduled games got moved around a little bit, but we saw the NFL pretty much play a normal season for the most part. They got through their playoffs and everything unscathed, got through the Super Bowl. And then we rolled into this year, and we're seeing the NHL and the NBA starting to let fans back in their stadiums. We're going to have an NCAA tournament this year, which is exciting. It's not going to be like normal, but there will be a tournament. And then Major League Baseball, hopefully by the time we get to summer this year with everything going on, we're going to have fans on opening day. We're going to get to see the Clydesdales and all of that stuff. And hopefully by May or June, we'll have 40,000 people back in ballparks. I mean, hell, if you're in Texas, you're going to have 40,000 people in the ballpark in April. But we've definitely made huge strides, and it's exciting to see that things are starting to slowly get back to normal.
Yeah, it's nice. But, Scott, we talked about the Texas thing the other day, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that yet. And I know the Dallas Stars are making their own plans. They're not going to go with what the governor's saying they can do. They're going to still do with a limited capacity, which is a good thing that the Stars are doing. I'm actually shocked. I wouldn't be shocked if the Texas Rangers did the same thing. I mean, they're told they can do this, but will they really do it?
Well, they've announced
the
Rangers have announced they're doing it. They've already said we're having a full 44,000 people on opening day. So yeah, the Rangers are doing it.
Yeah, and I envy the Rangers fans right now because yes, it's an expensive ticket for opening day, but those tickets are going to be cheaper than you would get at these limited capacity stadiums because I saw tickets for Blues games, literally, Scott, like $200 and up. You know what I mean? Like because there's so little fans in the stands, you're gonna charge more.
Right. Yeah, and depending on where you look, because if you actually look at the team sites or on StubHub or something, there's a huge difference there too, because those secondary markets are astronomically upcharging tickets. That's why the Cardinals a couple of weeks ago came out and said, don't use secondary markets to buy tickets because they're charging ridiculous rates. That's like at spring training. I don't know if you saw this. If you bought a ticket at the ticket office at Roger Dean Stadium or through the Cardinals, it was $22. StubHub was selling them starting at $250.
I thought tickets for spring training game Spirit were going to be more expensive because of the fact that there's limited capacity. I thought I read that.
Through the Cardinals ticket office, they were $22, which is higher than they were last year.
What are they usually, Scott? I know you've been down there.
It fluctuates from year to year. They're usually in the high teens to around $20, which isn't horrible.
Minor league prices, right?
It's higher than minor league prices. Minor league's cheaper than that, honestly, for the most part. I think I told you that story not too long ago. I went down to Memphis and went to AutoZone Park on a Sunday afternoon one day when I was living in Sykeston, and I spent $10 and sat 2 rows behind home plate.
That's awesome. That nothing like a minor league game. I went to GCS a couple times to watch. I actually did a game from GCS for live stream STL, and I also did I also watched a Gateway Grizzlies game there, and it's a fun atmosphere, dude. It really is. I mean, that's not minor league baseball, but it is kind of. You know what I mean?
Well, it is. It's independent minor league baseball, basically. And they're just not affiliated with major leagues,
which they could be coming up. Who knows? But Scott, before we actually, you know what? I'm going to take another break because there's a few more things I want to talk about with you. One's the potential XFL CFL merger. I'm sure you saw stuff on this, so I want your thoughts on that. And Les Miles, let's talk about that firing in Kansas. But hold on for that. We will be right back right here on Crunch Time.
Hi, I'm JD Houghton, host of the SAS Sports Show. Catch it every Thursday at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time for all things Saskatchewan sports.
Welcome back to Crunch Time here on ASTV Productions. Scott, it was announced a couple days ago that there are at least talks going on between the XFL and the CFL. What have you heard about that?
Just that there's talks. Exactly what those talks are, I'm not sure. I mean, there's been some speculation that there's trying to figure out some type of collaboration between the two leagues. To what extent, I have no idea at this point. They've talked about, I know The Rock said something about, just trying to get some bouncing ideas off of each other, seeing what they can do to make the game day experience more interesting. If there's things that they can do to change the game, that kind of stuff. I know there was some speculation about merger. It doesn't really sound, they're having negotiations, but it doesn't really sound like that's something that is at the forefront of these discussions.
Well, it's interesting, though, Scott. What do you think will come out of this? Do you think anything will come out of this?
I think they'll probably collaborate in some form. Again, to what extent, I don't know. They're having discussions to see if there's something they can do, if they can work together, if they can make the game better for either league. So, they're just trying to feel each other out and see what they want to do and see if there's anything they can do. So I don't really know what's going to come out of it, honestly. That's kind of where we're at right now.
That's where we're at right now. So stick with us. If there are any updates, we will sure bring those to you. Now, Scott, there was a situation that we didn't talk about when it happened. I'm actually shocked I didn't even think about talking about this. Les Miles getting canned at Kansas, and then the athletic director, I think the day after, getting canned. Talk about that, Scott, because that was kind of interesting to me. That I thought Les Miles, he has a good reputation. I'm shocked he got fired.
He doesn't have a good reputation. That's why he got fired.
Yeah.
There are reports coming out that during Les Miles' time at LSU, he had inappropriate relations with female students and potentially some faculty at LSU. There were some females that made reports against him about some inappropriate activity by Les Miles at LSU. These reports just came out in the last couple of weeks. Kansas found out about it. At first, they said they were going to just suspend Les Miles. Miles did not like that. He felt like there was too many questions about this report. Kansas ended up suspending him and then firing him because more accusations came out of inappropriate activity at LSU. And so Les Miles got fired, but actually they called it a separation, an agreement to part terms. And Miles got about almost a $2 million settlement buyout of his contract from Kansas, which is a huge number for somebody walking away under these circumstances. But they gave Les Miles about $2 million to go away. And then their athletic director, Jeff Long, got fired, like you said earlier this week, partially because of the fact that apparently he didn't do enough digging into Les Miles to find out about these reports, these accusations. And that's a bad look. Plus the other scandals that have gone on under his watch at Kansas, as their basketball program's been under a lot of scrutiny for the Adidas pay-to-play scandal, which is still being investigated, although it looks like Kansas is probably just going to get a slap on the wrist from all of that when it all plays out completely.
Disgusting. Yep.
But just a lot of controversy and a lot of not great publicity going on under Jeff's watch at Kansas. So they both got fired. But again, it comes back to you got to do your due diligence when you're hiring a coach, especially these days, because if there's any dirty laundry out there, you're not going to be able to hide it. Somebody's going to dig and find stuff. We've seen this with coaches and general managers in all sports in the last year where they get hired by a club and then, there was an indiscretion at one of their previous jobs, and that comes out and they end up getting fired, and then the new club looks bad for not digging into it. The old club looks bad for not, sharing that information. So there's a lot of questions about what Kansas knew when they made this Les Miles hire, and if they didn't know that this stuff was going on, why didn't they know? So, it's just a bad look for the Kansas athletic program, and it just builds on a lot of stuff that's tarnished that athletic program over the last about year and a half now.
So my thing is, how is KU still in in a tournament at this point? I mean, I know they have to be in there. Actually, why are they even playing in a conference tournament? At this point, because it's big bad Kansas, right?
There haven't been any penalties laid out against them to this point.
Well, that's my point, Scott. There should be.
Well, they're still investigating. Look how long it took for all the Mizzou stuff to come out a couple of years ago. It takes a long time for the NCAA to make decisions, especially when it's one of their prize programs. And let's face it, when you talk about college basketball or basketball in general, Kansas is the gold standard in a lot of ways because, James Naismith, the man that created basketball, their court in Kansas is named after him. I mean, he came out of there. So, Kansas is kind of the gold standard of college basketball in a lot of ways. And so they're going to take their time and, we'll see what happens. But this latest scandal definitely is another thing that's tarnished the athletic association or the athletic department at Kansas's reputation for sure.
Oh man, how much longer do you think it'll take, Scott?
No idea. It's the NCAA. They work on their own clock when they do things.
So the NCAA is being its corrupt self then, huh?
Yeah, I mean, the NCAA does things the way the NCAA does things.
It makes no damn sense whatsoever. But hey, we could spend another hour talking about how corrupt some of these organizations are. But the fact remains that, it's not going to change anything. So why even waste your breath? Anything else, Scott, before we get out of here tonight?
I think we've pretty much touched on everything here again tonight, Joe.
All right, and thank you guys for watching at home. With Scott Tobin, I'm Joe Hamilton. Be good to one another. Stay safe. I think we're on the back end of this thing, so let's do what we got to do so we can go back to enjoying things we love. Again, for Scott, I'm Joe. We will see you guys tomorrow, or see you guys next time.